Tonight, we're pleased to welcome Sarah Callan, manager of the Mystic Aquarium Animal Rescue Program, which responds to marine mammals and sea turtles along the coastline of Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Fisher's Island. The rescue program plays a vital role in monitoring, rescuing, rehabilitating, and releasing affected animals. As a primarily volunteer-based program, each year the team responds to over 200 marine mammals and an average of 20 sea turtles affected by threats such as entanglement, vehicle strikes, harassment, and disease. Sarah earned her Bachelor of Science in Psychology from St. Lawrence University in 2008. After graduation, Sarah moved to Queensland, Australia, where fun fact, she played a season with the Australian Women's Ice Hockey League. In her spare time, she surfed and volunteered at the Currumbin Wildlife Sanctuary Veterinarian Hospital, helping rehabilitate native wildlife. Her passion for marine life led her to Oahu, Hawaii, where she worked at the Waikiki Aquarium, caring for endangered Hawaiian monk seals and other marine species. She later joined the Hawaiian monk seal health and disease program, continuing her work in marine mammal response and research. In 2016, Sarah accepted her dream role at the Mystic Aquarium. We'll have time for questions at the end, and please welcome Sarah.
Thank you. Steal your spot for
this mic over here. Wait, this is so that you can.
Oh, I think this one.
Oh, well,
this
that
one works.
Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic.
Sorry.
Well, thanks for having me, everyone. It's great to be here. I know there's some familiar faces. We have our first responder training on the island, and just by show of hands, is anyone else? I feel so bad. We have over 600 volunteers with our program, so I recognize a lot of faces sometimes, but I know we have first responders over here and here.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, great. Well, welcome everybody else. Like Sue said, my name is Sarah. I'm a manager Animal Rescue Program, and today we will be talking about what our program does, the animals we respond to, but also how climate change and human impacts are affecting these animals and what we're learning from each of them. I wasn't sure if there were going to be kids here today or students who might, want to learn more about career paths, which I know we spoke a little bit about that a bit ago, but just to kind of touch upon how I got to where I am today. I did spend some time in Australia where I got to volunteer at a wildlife sanctuary. This was fantastic. My first experience really working with the animal care side of things and being able to see animals who were affected by fires and, who had different illnesses and being able to treat them and then release them. This was kind of my first experience with that, which was an amazing thing to see and be a part of. I later went on to Hawaii, came back to Connecticut for a bit, decided, the cold wasn't necessarily what I wanted after living in Australia for a year. So I took an internship in Hawaii, and my goal was to just, I got that taste of working with animals. I wanted to get as involved with as many different organizations and facilities as I could. And so I had an internship at the Waikiki Aquarium with the training side of things, which was very different from the medical rehab side of things, but I was fascinated with the training. I have a degree in psychology, so animal behavior was very fascinating to me, and getting to work with a critical endangered species and educating the public about that was a really special opportunity. And then I just spent any free time I had volunteering, so I was at the Honolulu Zoo. And then I also volunteered with NOAA's National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration out there. And that's where I had this really unique opportunity. They were like, hey, do you want to go live on this uninhabited island about 1,000 miles away from civilization for 4 months, no contact with the outside world? And I was like, that sounds kind of scary, but really cool, and I want the challenge, so sign me right up. And so there's 15 researchers and biologists. We took this research vessel from Oahu, and we went all the way across these atolls, this northwestern Hawaiian island chain. And all 15 people and biologists were dropped off on different atolls. So I was dropped off where that star is. It's called Laysan Island, with 2 other biologists. And this is where we spent the next 4 months. And our goals and objectives when we were there were to monitor the Hawaiian monk seal population, which is a critically endangered species. At the time, the population was at about 1,200 animals. Due to this program's efforts, there's about 1,600 animals right now, which is really exciting and showing that these efforts really do make an impact. But I got to experience amazing things. And we did surveys around the island, monitored pups, took samples. All of our lives, we lived out of these buckets for 4 months, and you got to bring 10 buckets each of stuff, and those were our tents. You could kind of see them. This is how, oh yeah, right here. These are all of our tents. But this was home, and it looks like paradise, and it was. But what you can't see in this picture is the other side of the island. And this is what it looked like everywhere. And there was just trash and marine debris absolutely everywhere. And we were living in all this essentially. We had to walk the island every day. It was about 3 miles long, looking for seals. But what our job really became out there was disentangling animals. There were albatross and birds all over the island. And they all, would have plastic in their stomach. And so it was actually one of the more eye-opening experiences I had. And this is really where my career kind of took a turn. And this is the stomach of one of the birds. We found scissors, lighters, toothbrushes. You think about all the different plastic items that we use in our everyday lives. We don't see where it goes. We have that luxury of just throwing it out. Someone comes and picks it up. But I like to tell students and people we work with, imagine we lived in this room and every single piece of plastic that we used every day, we had to stay in this room with us. That's basically what was happening out here. When you think about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, there's all these gyres and currents that are taking trash from Asia, from the United States, from all over the world to this one area, and it's about 3 times the size of Texas. And so that's what was washing up, and we had refrigerators. I mean, anything that we use every day that's plastic that goes to landfills often blows into the water. So that's where I was like, this has been a life-changing experience. I want to be a voice for these animals, because until you actually see it firsthand and are living in it, it's really hard to make that connection. And I think a lot of people will see it on TV, but then you go about your daily lives and you kind of disassociate from it. So I really, after that experience, wanted to make sure that I could help spread this messaging and awareness and be that voice and that advocate for these animals. So that's where I got my dream job at the Mystic Aquarium, which is very different for me. I started off mostly working with seals and fish and invertebrates at the aquarium. And now I got to work with whales and dolphins and sea turtles and seals. And I grew up in Hamden, Connecticut, would go to the beach all the time. I knew seals were in the area, but I honestly did not realize how many dolphins and whales and sea turtles call our shoreline home. So that's been a really fun experience for me. Our animal rescue program covers over 1,000 miles of coastline. So we respond to Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Fishers Island, New York, obviously. Fishers Island is part of our coverage area, even though it's part of New York, because of our distance and proximity. So we're able to get out here a lot faster than a lot of other folks on Long Island. We have a 24-hour hotline, which has been such a treat for us. We rotate it as staff, but we can get calls at 4 a.m. about animals. We've had seals in the middle of the road. It always relentlessly goes off right about sunset when people are walking the beach. That's when the animals are found typically. So when we think we're going home at 5, we're usually at the aquarium sometimes till about 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock, depending on the day. We respond to both live animals and deceased animals, and that deceased animal response, as sad as it is, we actually collect so much data and learn so much information from those types of strandings. And we have a really big team of volunteers. Like I mentioned, over 600 first responders. So thank you to our first responders who are in the room, because our first responders play such a vital role and are essentially our eyes on animals in the field. And then we have a core group of volunteers who help us with the direct care of animals at the aquarium that we're rehabilitating. And then just a quick overview of our whole region. So We have our animal rescue program at the aquarium, but we're part of the greater Atlantic region, which is made up of other stranding organizations from Maine down to Virginia. And we all work together. And we're actually one of the only seal rehabilitation facilities within the region, especially near the Massachusetts area up to Maine. Maine is one of the closest rehab facilities. So we bring in a lot of other animals from other areas that strand for rehabilitation. A lot of what we do is really focused around the protection of these animals. So all marine mammals are a federally protected species, and it's illegal to hunt, harass, capture, or kill any marine mammal or attempt to do so. And I think this is where that take comes into play. And I don't know if you guys have heard a lot in the news about takes in regards to wind farms and stuff like that. I think there's a little misunderstanding around that word. So take can be disrupting an animal, and that's really just changing their normal behavior by your presence, or if that's a vessel, if that's you walking on the beach, if you disrupt their normal behavior, that's essentially a take. So that has to get reported. And so there's various types of responses we do with our program. One of the busier or most common types of responses we go on are seal responses. And so we have harbor seals, gray seals, harp seals, hooded seals in our area. A lot of our responses involve entanglement cases, malnourishment. We are, like I said, one of the only facilities that does seal rehab. So we have a lot of animals transferred to us. And we will respond to all animals of different ages. So we have what we call harbor seal pups with a lanugo coat. Those animals are usually premature. Harbor seal pups are born without that lanugo coat. They're born in the summertime, which kind of makes sense. They don't need an extra coat to stay warm. But then we have our gray seal pups, which are born in the winter, and that's the most common type of seal we see here. Gray seals are born with that thick lanugo coat because they need to stay warm in those winter months. They will gain about 70 to 100 pounds when they nurse with mom, and they only nurse for about 3 to 4 weeks, and then they're left on their own. So a lot of the calls we get are people concerned about a young animal like this on the beach in the winter, but a lot of what we do is reassure people it's normal, and then we'll always make sure that people are keeping a distance from that animal. If an animal has to come back in for rehabilitation, this is just an overview of our clinic. A lot of these units are smaller. They're made for short-term holding because our goal is to turn animals around as quick as possible. So we want to get them back out to their ocean home. We limit our contacts with them. They're all, wild animals, and we don't want them to become habituated and used to people. So you'll see around our bigger pool there, that's our pre-release pool, we have a tarp. And so for our animals, a lot of the fish falls from the sky for them. We will hide behind that tarp. I like to joke with our interns that they have throwing practice on their first day with us. They have to successfully toss fish from behind the tarp into the pool with the seals. Occasionally, if you are a bystander walking by, a visitor walking by our clinic, there may be some, rogue fish falling near you. So always beware when you're walking by our clinic doors. But you'll see that the pools kind of progress. They get a little bit bigger, and that's as animals transition through rehab, get stronger, they're going to move pools. But these are like hospital rooms, so they're not made to be really big. We want to confine an animal. We don't want to have any disease transmission between these units. So we're very careful about our biosecurity and disinfection in our clinic. Some of the main causes, like I mentioned, of animals coming in are those entanglements. So this is an entanglement wound around this seal. Malnutrition, respiratory diseases are really big ones. So that biosecurity with zoonotic diseases, these guys can get influenza, a lot of different respiratory stuff. So we have to be very mindful about that when they come in for rehab. But we will do everything we can to get them back out to their ocean home. And then this is just an example of a response. So we will typically get calls about people right on top of a seal. They're very worried about it. When we go out, we put stakes and rope, and that's how far we try to keep people away from an animal. And we have a little trick where if you're holding your thumb up, if your thumb completely covers the seal, so I can't quite get there, but then you're far enough away. So that's one way to know. And then this is just a little diagram here of harbor and gray seal trends. One thing that some of our staff are looking at are trends over the years in these animals. And it's kind of interesting, you'll notice, 2011, the gray seal and harbor seal population was pretty even for the most part. You'll see a big spike in 2018 and 2019, and that's because we had something called an unusual mortality event happen where there was Phocine distemper virus had a big impact on these species, and there was a high mortality rate for animals during those years. So we had a lot more strandings. And then COVID's really low because our program had shut down temporarily. But now we're seeing a lot more gray seals than harbor seals. And you can sort of see that trend start there. I don't have the 2024 and 2025 data on this yet, but we'll talk about that a little bit more in some of the slides, how that population is changing. And I'm curious what you guys see mostly around Fisher's Island, but we really don't see too many harbor seals, at least on the beaches. They're more offshore on rocks. So we also do sea turtle responses. Another common response for us, and most of the cases that we get are with green sea turtles or Kemp's Ridley sea turtles and loggerheads. We're starting to see a lot more green sea turtles in the area. We have had an increase, and I'm not sure if that's due to warming waters, but typically the Kemp's and the loggerheads are a very common species. Kemp's Ridleys, which is in that box over there, it's a cold stunned animal. Those guys are the smallest species of sea turtle. They're also the most critically endangered species. And this is a loggerhead sea turtle here that was sadly hit by a boat last summer. If a sea turtle needs to come in for rehabilitation, this is just a view of where we take them. We're very excited. This is a newer facility for us. It was built a couple years ago, and it's really allowed us to expand our sea turtle rehabilitation efforts. And every species of sea turtle that we respond to is listed as threatened or endangered, so our conservation impacts with the sea turtle program growing is a lot bigger now, so we're very excited about that. You see a little sea turtle on a surfboard, we call it, in the upper right there. That's a cold stunned sea turtle, and when they come in, they are very hypothermic, and so when they cold stun, their respiration rate really slows, their circulation slows down. And they almost look like they're deceased. And you will find them on the high tide line. So if you guys, in the winter months, usually end of November, December, January, I know we were talking before, there's been at least one sea turtle that strands during those months here that's alive still over the past couple of years. But that's the time of year we find them. So they're not strong when they come in. They're very bruised. So we have to float them on their little surfboards until they gain the strength to start swimming on their own again. So some of the common reasons that we see sea turtle strand are really the cold stunning, entanglements, vessel strike cases. We see a lot more accidental hookings lately too, especially over the past year or two. And so that's one thing that we're really trying to stress with people is that if you accidentally hook a sea turtle, do not remove that hook yourself. That can cause a lot more damage to the animal. And what we do ask is to give us a call. You'll see in this photo right here, this is the hook, which is embedded in the turtle's esophagus. So imagine someone trying to remove that themselves. They would really perforate the esophagus of that animal, which could be very detrimental. So here we are with the same sea turtle. We anesthetized it or sedated it a little bit, and we were able to successfully remove that hook. The animal was turned around very quickly and able to get released back to the water. And then one fun thing I love about the sea turtles is that we transport them in banana boxes. Everyone always thinks about monkeys or other species, primates when you see bananas, but we actually use these because they're the perfect size to transport those really small sea turtles. And they're lightweight and they have great ventilation. So we actually just released 22 sea turtles in Georgia 2 months ago. And all of our sea turtles went down in these banana boxes. We also work with an organization called Turtles Fly 2, and it's volunteer pilots that will fly our turtles down south for us, but the pilots and the planes are very tiny. They're like 4-seater planes, so they need all the space they can get, and the weight is such a big thing. So these are very lightweight, so we can transport more turtles if they go down in their banana boxes. But I thought this was a cute picture from a couple months ago. Another type of response we have are live dolphin responses. We see most commonly, this is a bottlenose dolphin right here. They're offshore bottlenose dolphins that can get massive. It's hard to tell in this photo, but this dolphin was actually upwards of 650 pounds. Half of its body is actually in mud. And so these cases can be very challenging. We usually get reports of dolphins swimming very close to shore in like a circular motion. So that's kind of the behavior that signals to us that something's not quite right with this animal. So they're usually very sick, and you'll hear about mass strandings on Cape Cod where they have multiple animals strand at once, and that's usually due to the severe tidal shifts they have out there. Here we don't really have that. So what we're seeing are very sick animals that strand individually. And that's a common dolphin on the right there that we responded to a couple months ago this past winter. So unfortunately these animals are really sick, but we'll bring our veterinarian out with us. We do a full exam, and then we can decide if an animal would be a rehabilitation candidate, which isn't very common, or if it's the most humane thing to euthanize them so they're not suffering any longer, which is always a tough decision, but it's kind of a gift we can give them so they're not suffering. And then we have our live large whale strandings, which is a call you never want to get. But this was an interesting case. This is a fin whale that stranded 2 years ago in February in Narragansett area. And this animal was about 60 feet long, so a very long animal. And it was very thin, in bad body condition, and it was in an awful spot. You can see it's on rocks. When the tide got really low, it was completely beached. And an animal this heavy really can't support, they need to be buoyant, or else they start to crush their organs and go into shock if they're on the beach for a long time. So this was a really tough case, but again, we go out with our whole vet team. We tried to give this animal the opportunity to refloat at high tide, which it wasn't able to. It was just really too sick. And so this animal sadly was euthanized, but we were able to conduct a necropsy on it, which is something we always try to do anytime we have a large whale strand. There's an unusual mortality event that's declared for all the different species of whales that we see in our area, which includes the humpback whales, the minke whales, and the North Atlantic right whale. And when there is an unusual mortality event declared, it's essentially like a federal investigation. So we want to do everything we can, no matter how decomposed an animal is when they strand. We try to get all these different details and clues as to what may have been the cause of death, because we have this mortality increase. And so it's always interesting. There's never an ideal scenario when a whale washes up. A lot of times it might be in someone's backyard who lives on the water, or in an area that's really not easily accessible. And a lot of times I think people expect us to have this quick response and be able to wave our magic wand and make this animal disappear that washed up on their house. But it's not always that easy. And these are a list of the things that we really have to think about. There's lots of resources we have to get together in order to conduct a necropsy. And we look through the entire exterior of the body. We look for impressions or any clues that might indicate, an animal might be entangled at one point. And then also we'll go internally. And so we're trying to piece all these things together. We look at the stomach, and it's interesting, no matter if an animal is really decomposed, we can still get a lot of really great data. And you're looking at that stomach, you're looking at the blubber thickness, if it's a healthy animal in good body condition, and then if it was actively eating at the time of death. And then if you look at the blubber or look for any hemorrhaging or signs that an animal may have had interaction with like blunt force trauma or a vessel strike, you can piece all those clues together to try to come up with your suspect cause of death. And along with that, we take samples of different tissues and organs, and we send those off to a pathologist. And so a cause of death really can't be confirmed until we get all those results back. but we can kind of piece things together. And this all, tells us so much about what's going on in the environment. When you think about how much vessel traffic is out there, because vessel strikes is probably one of the leading causes of death we see in the whale strandings in our area. But you think about how much we're purchasing online, when online purchases have skyrocketed, especially since COVID too. So there's lots of cargo ships in the area. We have some really big ports in New England, along our shoreline too. And then you also think about like cruise lines and all these big ships. And so these animals have all this noise in the water coming from all over from a lot of vessels. And so a lot of times they can't even figure out which way a vessel might be coming. And these cargo ships are so massive. It's like a village, a town, just like running through. And so I don't think they even realize there's animals nearby sometimes. So one of the things that we can use this data for is maybe changing shipping routes if now whales are in a different area than they used to be, which kind of ties into this climate change thing. When you think about different fish species in the area at different times of year, if the water temperature is changing, we're now pairing that with where we're seeing animals stranding and where we're seeing a lot of whales, and hoping to be able to use that information to help change some of these different routes and stuff that vessels are taking. And then we use the incident command system a lot, any type of response. So this is essentially like a universal language that's used within like the Coast Guard, and it helps to coordinate in these emergency types of scenarios. So that's something that our team is trained in. So a lot of these large scale events, it's not really safe when you're dealing with big knives and a lot of people and a massive hole in the ground, because that's the most successful way to dispose of an animal that large. And so this is a really great way to keep things organized. So our team is trained in that. And then we also just wanted to show our whale strandings over the past couple of years, because this is a big topic in the news a lot lately, especially surrounding wind farms too. So this is in Rhode Island. Basically, that's where we get most of our large whale strandings. But you'll notice that our actual highest year for strandings was 2017. And then over the past couple of years, we've kind of had that average around 3 or 4 whale strandings per year. So for our area specifically, we haven't had a big increase in strandings, but I will say the cause of death between species is kind of different. So for humpback whales, we're seeing a lot of those entanglements, vessel strikes. For minke whales, we're actually seeing a lot of infectious disease, which I'll get into a little bit with climate change. And still those entanglements. And then obviously North Atlantic right whales, it's a lot of those entanglement cases with the lobster pots and stuff like that. Manatees, guys, who ever thought I'd be talking about manatees here, but here we are. We have actually had a couple manatee responses over the years. And this is something that I'm wondering if we're going to start to see more of as the water temperatures are changing. But for manatees, we had in 2016 a manatee strand in the Cape Cod area. This is Washburn. She stranded and was brought to our facility for her long-term care. She was 6 months pregnant, which was a really cool discovery when she came in for rehab. And I'll never forget, I tell this in the class sometimes, but I had just started working at the aquarium in 2016, and we got a call about this manatee that this facility designated for its long-term care. And my boss at the time was on vacation, of course, and I've never worked with manatees before. So it was 5 o'clock, and I found out this manatee could come to our facility as early as the next day. So I started Googling how much manatees eat. What do they eat? They can eat up to 20% of their body weight every day, and they eat lettuce and spinach. So I had to go find 1,400 pounds of lettuce and spinach to get us through the first week of this manatee's care. So I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So I went to every supermarket, and I was like, how much lettuce and spinach do you guys have? And they looked at me like I was absolutely nuts. But we did it. We found nobody ate salad in town for quite some time with Washburn, but it was a really fun case for us. And these cases involve so much collaboration too. I mean, multiple organizations working together in order to even get her to us. She was massive. but she was such a cool animal. And it was funny because we also, cleaned the pool as best we could, but there was a little algae on it. And as soon as she got in there, she was like the perfect patient. She cleaned all the algae off. She ate it all for us. And she was really, really fun to have. But she stayed with us for about a month and a half. And then the Coast Guard actually helped us fly her to Florida, where she was released down there and she was tagged. And she was the first manatee that ever was recorded in terms of like her movements and passed down to the Bahamas. And she beelined it for the Bahamas as soon as she got to Florida. So we all kind of joked. She knew what she was doing. She got her free flight down to Florida. She was like, all right, great, thanks guys, off to the Bahamas, where she gave birth. And then 2 years ago, we actually had another manatee pop up in Rhode Island. Again, I'm learning a lot about manatees, but this manatee was in Weekapaug initially when it was sighted. And I grabbed my paddleboard the next morning and I was like, I'm going to find this manatee. I looked all around the pond in Weekapaug for about an hour or two. Couldn't find it anywhere. And then we got a hotline call right when I got out of the water that the manatee was in Point Judith area, which I had no idea they could swim that fast and so far in such a short period of time. So that was kind of interesting to see just how quickly they could travel. So this manatee was really, really hard to find. I learned that we had a drone looking for it, and they go underwater for long periods of time, and you really could not see the manatee until it was like a foot under the surface coming up for air. They take a quick breath and then they go back down for a long period of time. So unfortunately, this case didn't have the ending we were hoping for. We had all the plans together to respond and collect this animal if we found it, but it didn't really have the ending we had hoped, but we tried. And we're learning something new on every response about the manatees. Washburn, that's Washburn on the right there. So if a manatee did have to come in for rehab or a dolphin, we do have these pools and the ability to do so. We have a crane, which is really helpful. And manatees have a high bioload, so there's only certain types of filtration that can really handle manatee rehab as well. So these pools can handle it, but we don't really have too many other pools that could. And then every animal that comes in for rehab, we will do everything we can to get them that second chance at life. And that's one thing I'm very proud of working at Mystic. We have a really fantastic vet team, and we do surgeries on animals. We just did a partial digit amputation of a seal's flipper about 2 weeks ago. And so we'll just do everything we can to get them in and out back to their ocean home as quick as possible. And then the goal for every animal is to get them to that release stage. It's funny because we've had a lot of awareness that's growing about our program, which is very exciting. We've had some record number of releases. Last year, we had about 2,000 people at Hammonasset for one of our releases, which we weren't expecting at all. The park rangers definitely weren't expecting it, or the police in Madison. So I think we backed up the entire highway, so people couldn't really get anywhere, but it was really neat to see how excited everyone is about sending animals home and our efforts. And then this was from our sea turtle release in Jekyll Island, when we just released 22 sea turtles. We don't publicly announce every single release now, especially in the summertime with all the parking and stuff. And we're very selective moving forward, I think, about what releases we're announcing to everybody, because we don't want to make all of the park rangers and police officers upset that we work with. But, it's a really fun event. So you guys should try to come to one if you ever can. And then this is just to kind of show a quick snapshot of our total cases that we get every year. So these are our responses. And there is a bit of a difference between strandings and sightings. A stranded animal is either a deceased animal or an animal that needs medical attention or needs us to bring it back to its home that's out of habitat, like a manatee. Sightings are reports that we still respond to. So we'll send someone out. It's a healthy animal that looks fine, but maybe a seal's just resting on the beach in a very busy area. We will set up monitoring for that animal throughout the day till they go back in the water for the animal safety and human safety. So this just kind of shows all of our efforts between all the different types of responses. The 326 responses in 2019 was that Phocinus tempervirus unusual mortality event year. So that's why that number is really high, but we are slowly kind of increasing in our numbers and becoming busier and busier every year. And then these animals that we respond to are really sentinel species for our ocean and human health. We will collect samples from every animal that comes in for rehab. We're looking for different types of diseases that they might have, which could directly correlate to human illness as well. It also tells us a lot about the environment. And I'll give you an example from 2 cases we had about 2 years ago. I had never had an animal come in with this before. And we had an animal that was reported to still be alive, kind of getting tossed around in the shoreline, and minimally responsive. Something neurologic was definitely going on. It was a harbor seal, an adult, brought her in, did blood work. All the blood work turned out fine. So we're like, what's going on with the seal? Did it, eat toxin somehow, or we're not sure. We ran a protozoal panel, which showed that it did come back positive for something called Sarcocystis neurona, which is a parasite that's only transmitted through a possum, so a possum feces. How do you think a seal would have gotten this? So when you think about runoff, this animal stranded around the Newport, Rhode Island area. And so there is a lot of agriculture land, inland, and a lot of runoff water into this one area. And so it was interesting because about 6 months later, we had another seal from the same area that came in with the same exact thing. And this is, I've never had this case before, but when you think about all these animals now are being impacted by runoff, so it must be from the food that they're eating. So that's the food that we eat too. We're talking about oysters and, different fish species that we could be ingesting some of this stuff. So just thinking about human health in relation to what we're learning about animals, it's so important. And that's why a lot of times people ask, seals aren't an endangered species. Why is it so important to rehab them? Because it costs, I'd love to actually have you guys guess. How much do you think it costs to rehab one seal for about 3 months? Any guess?
$10,000.
You know the answer.
Oh,
that was right. Spot on.
That was my answer.
Yeah, it's about $10,000. When you think about all the medication and we have to do water testing and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a lot of money. Why is it worth it? I mean, when you think about all the damage we're doing to the environment, first of all, a lot of these animals come in with entanglements and human-caused issues and reasons for strandings. And then we learn so much. I mean, seals are like the perfect sample size. We have a lot of seals in the area. When you're thinking about research, you want as big of a sample size as you can get to learn as much as you can. And so we have this perfect sample size where we're taking all these different specimens from seals and learning so much about what's going on directly with the environment, which directly impacts us. And then obviously the necropsies, like I mentioned, tell us so much. And then we're looking long-term at different trends with species, and that will directly correlate to the environment as well. And then let's talk about climate change. So some things that we're learning directly about the animals and how they're impacted by climate change is migration patterns to colder waters. And so we're seeing this in a variety of ways. We're seeing less and less harbor seals that are pupping in the summer months in this area. It's not common for us to see the harbor seals, but we're our partners, and this is why our network is so important, working with other organizations. Our friends in Maine aren't necessarily seeing as many harbor seals born in Maine. So we don't know why. Are they impacted by things like these unusual mortality events where it's posting distemper virus? Is it because they're just moving farther and farther north to Canada because the water is getting so warm here? So this is something that is changing so quickly, and so it's kind of hard for us to keep up with it all, but we're trying to collect as much data and learn as much as we can over the coming years. There's also been big changes. I don't know if any of you guys fish a lot, but we try to work really closely with a lot of fishers because they're on the water all the time and know a lot more about what's going on the day-to-day. And we're learning how there's a lot of different fish species in the area at certain times of years, or certain fish aren't in this area anymore. And so that's one big thing. And I know the green crab population's kind of taken over in this area too, which is an issue. So all these, I mean, it's like a domino effect throughout the whole ecosystem. When one thing changes, it's going to directly impact something else. And so we're seeing that with the animals we're responding to. Ocean acidification. This directly also correlates to the increase in pathogen survival. So when you have these warming waters and the ocean acidification is increasing, a lot of these bacteria are going to be able to survive a lot longer in the water. And so a couple of things we're going to be able to see are these protozoal infections, which is interesting because we are starting to see these cases. We've never seen them before. We're seeing brucella, so that infectious disease that I mentioned for a lot of these large whale species. That's something that we are finding in particularly the minke whales, infectious disease. And then antibiotic-resistant bacteria might be on the rise too. And that's something we've actually noticed in our clinic as well. Animals that come in with certain infections, in previous years, we could just give them, these lower dose antibiotics that aren't as hard hitting. And now we're having to go directly to some of the hardest hitting antibiotics to treat them. So it's very interesting. This can also correlate to human health. I've talked to some nurses that I'm friends with who are also saying something similar with antibiotic resistance is going on in people as well. You also think about people flushing medication right down the toilet, that's going to go to the ocean. And so we are exposed to all these things on a regular basis. And so we're seeing that with the animals that are also exposed to it as well. So not the doom and gloom, I don't want to be, but it is interesting. It's so important to, learn from the animals that we respond to. I just wanted to kind of touch upon some research and different projects that we have going on at the aquarium. So we work very closely. Well, we are working with Ørsted, so wind farm projects, to learn as much as we can about the area that these wind farms are proposed to be built in. And so some of the projects that we are looking at and we got funding for are to look at monitoring stress hormones in gene expressions in animals. That could be really telling for if things like construction and stuff like that are stressing these animals out. And you can find those that gene expression in fecal samples, which is really easy. And so our research team is really looking into that to see if, and this is all changes and things we're looking at for before wind farms are constructed, during construction, and then after to see if there's any differences. Looking at those trends in sea turtle and marine mammal strandings over the years, monitoring movements and diving behaviors of gray seals in the area. And so that's one thing that's been very exciting. Do you guys know how much a satellite tag costs? You guys might know it, so don't guess. But a satellite tag is what we would put on an animal to track their movements, their dive patterns. The battery life lasts about 3 months, so it's not super long, but we get some really great data. Any guesses?
500?
2,000.
5,000. Yeah, 5,000. Mm-hmm. So we have never been able to afford to put satellite tags on all of the seals we've released. In the past, we maybe put one satellite tag on a seal a year if it's a really unique case where we're trying to, we had to remove the whole inner ear canal of a seal once, and so we weren't sure if that was going to be affected by diving with different pressures and stuff. So for that case, we wanted to put a satellite tag on it. So the past 2 years has been really exciting because now we have this funding. We were able to put satellite tags on a big handful of our seals from the Ørsted funding, and then I'm going to talk about another project that funded the rest of the seals. So now we're able to actually see where our seals go right after they get released and for the next couple months, how long they're diving for. And so this information is really helpful for the wind farm construction too, because are animals staying in the area? Are they leaving? Are their movements changing depending on those? Because this is kind of a project that's first of its kind. We don't know how it's going to impact anything because it's along the whole shoreline. So we're trying to learn more about that. And then we're also using eDNA to detect the presence of different protected species in the area. And this is a really neat project that our research team is working on where when we have seals come in for rehab or a sea turtle, they go into a pool that we know is 350 gallons or 700 gallons. And so we know the volume of water in that pool. We also know the species. So our research team comes and they collect different samples from that water. And they know that there's a gray seal in there, so they develop their protocol where they can detect gray seal DNA from that water sample. When we release the same seal, they come to the release. Now the seal's in the open ocean, but we know the exact species that's getting released right at that time, and so they're able to determine a protocol. This is way beyond my pay grade, what they do with that, but they're able to now collect water from the open ocean and be able to determine what different species are in that vicinity from that sample. So that's a really cool project that's also going on from this. This is one of our researchers sent me this just to look at some of the trends and data over the years, which kind of shows the Long Island area too, where animals are typically stranding. So we have a lot of animals in that Middlesex kind of area. And then we actually do get like dolphins and sea turtles and stuff that go down towards Fairfield and kind of west into deeper into the Sound too. And so these are stranding. So these are animals that, remember, wash up deceased or they strand and need medical attention. These are sighted animals. So these are animals which some of them actually go into like rivers and stuff too. But these are animals that are healthy that were just reported to us just displaying normal behaviors. And then this is where the proposed, or where some of the wind farms are being built. So we're able to kind of use that SAT-tag data, some of our stranding data to see where animals are typically stranding. Like that dot right in the middle of this Boehm wind lease area, I'm assuming that that was a harbor or gray seal. So we're able to see where these animals are typically swimming and where these proposed or current wind farm areas are going to be.
So the problem with the wind farm is the construction process more so than when it's up and running?
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of questions about all of it. I mean, we obviously need renewable energy and alternate sources of energy. So we get lots of questions from the public. And so this is kind of a way for us to, because we don't have answers for a lot of it at this point. So this is one way where we're able to at least collect some data to try to find out more. But I do know that there's so many different measures being taken to reduce noise during, the construction process. We have not seen any impact on animals so far, and I know a lot of people think that whales are stranding because of them, but the way I see it, if these wind farms right now were impacting whales, we would have a lot more whales stranding because we have tons of whales in our areas. We get reports. I just had someone send me a video of thousands of dolphins right offshore. And we haven't seen a big increase at all in our area since any of these have started to be constructed. I don't know if that will change, but that's something that we are constantly investigating and trying to learn more about. But so far, the good news is we haven't seen any signs that they're directly impacting any of these animals. And then Block Island. We love our islands with our program. This is a really interesting area. And I'm bringing up Block Island. I know we're talking about Long Island, but it's a really unique scenario. And seals don't just stay on Block Island. They kind of go all over. So a lot of these animals are probably in our area too over here. But prior to 2018, we really rarely had seals. And this is the north light of Block Island. We've really rarely had seals there at all, or at least all year long. It was really just seasonally in the winter because that's when they pup and nurse. And so at this point here in the winter, maybe we had like 10 people call us about seals. Ever since basically COVID is when we saw a big boom. 2018, we started seeing seals there all year long. And then the population really has doubled pretty much every year. So we had 2022 between 50 to 100 seals when we did a population count. 2023, 327 seals was our highest count for that year. And these are typically between the months of March till May is when we have the highest population count, which checks, that's totally normal for this species when they're mating, breeding, pupping. And then last year we were like, holy smokes, 715 seals. Well, we blew that out of the water this year with over 1,300 seals. So these are both taken from this year in the months of April. And you can just see, I mean, someone thought these were like little rocks, and I was like, oh no, those are seals. So we were approached, oh, and also there's a lot more human interactions in this area now. So Block Island's a very big tourist area. We have a webcam out there now. We've been working on a project with Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management on researching this population. And so they were able to support those other satellite tags that we've been putting out on animals, and then a webcam out on Block Island on the lighthouse. So these are from our webcam, which is kind of hard to watch now because you see people bring dogs up to seals and bring their kids next to the seals. And now we have this issue where the seals are becoming habituated to people and very used to people, which can be very dangerous because gray seals especially are very aggressive. They have sharp teeth. They can carry zoonotic diseases. And now we're seeing, people walk up to them and they're just staying there. And people don't realize, they think their kids can go right next to them and take pictures. So it's kind of an interesting, unique situation. We've also had a huge rise in entanglements. Last year, for the total year, we had 22 entanglements. Already this year, and actually this is needs to be updated to 25 entangled animals reported to our hotline just from Block Island at that one location. And they get entangled. We're seeing a lot of fishing gear. This is kind of like a twine, like a plastic twine. And then also packaging strap just from purchasing stuff online. We've had animals entangled in all sorts of stuff.
How do you untangle them? I mean, you can't just...
Well, that's the challenge. Yeah, so I say we've had 25 reported. And we don't want to double count anything, so we make sure they're all individual animals. We've only successfully disentangled 13, but that is actually a huge feat for us because they're so challenging to get. And Rhode Island DEM did give us funding for a UTV, and so that's been the game changer. We're able to, because the North Light of Block Island, it's about a mile hike out there, and so by the time we would get out there, you take a ferry, you get out there, and the seal's back in the water. They're active. But now that we have the UTV, we can put a kennel right on it, jet right out there. Our responders are trained to use it on Block Island, and they're able to kennel the animal for us, immediately get it on the ferry, and we pick it up and Narragansett it. So we have a system down now. We've done advanced training with that team. So this was a huge year for us so far. It's only July, but getting 13 animals is very exciting.
So to disentangle it, you actually have to take it back to the aquarium?
We do, because sometimes the entanglements are so deep, and if you pull something the wrong way, you can lacerate like the esophagus or the trachea or something and cause more damage. So we'd like to bring them back so we can do a full assessment. Sometimes they have bad infections that we need to treat. So we usually will bring them back. And then if they look good and they don't have a big wound or anything, we'll just release them.
And do you release them back where you got them?
So good question. We don't. They will travel back to Block Island or wherever they want to go within hours. So I did spend, I don't know if you guys ever heard of Schubert the seal. Look up this case, Schubert Beverly. And I'm not going to say anything else, but it's quite the story. But that was a seal that's stranded in Massachusetts in a pond. And it actually was one of our seals that came into rehab as a pup. We released it, and the seal was 5 years old now. So because this animal ended up in a pond, everyone was like, let's bring it back with this seal population on Block Island so it can be with other seals and learn how to act. Well, we probably spent about $1,000 to get it back to Block Island, and we tracked it. Within the next morning, it was back in Beverly, Massachusetts. It was like at the pond entrance. I was like, oh my God, no. But I mean, it just shows, I'm like, well, that money went down the drain, basically. But
it's actually kind of interesting to learn that he didn't like the seals, or he liked where he was before.
Yeah, I know. And it's amazing that they know where to go. Yeah. And that he could find his way back there by the next morning. So very interesting stuff. But
Is there a seal count?
Pardon me?
Did you go through the canal?
Oh, so no. So for him to get into the canal in the first place, it was like a super moon high tide. I mean, they need to make a movie out of it, but they had to go like a quarter of a mile through a tunnel, up some embankment thing. But the only way he could have done it was if the water level was really high. And so luckily he went to the canal entrance, but he couldn't get up it because of the water level. Thank goodness. But we were like calling like the police of Beverly. We're like, somebody go down there and block it. We can't go through this again. But the seal population on Block Island has posed a lot of questions. Is the seal population growing? And I mean, think about seals where the population was almost completely decimated prior to the Marine Mammal Protection Act. You could bring a seal nose to the town hall and you'd get $5. So the population was wiped out. For us, I know like people who like to fish aren't excited about this, but for us, this is super exciting because the population's finally rebounding after all. I mean, that was the 70s. It's taken this long for the population to actually get to a healthy state. And now we're starting to see sharks, yes, in the area. I think the seals could be a draw on Cape Cod, but a lot of the sharks we're seeing are also interested in fish. And when you think about climate change, the sharks like warmer water. So we're seeing different fish in the area. The sharks are following the prey. They're following the warmer water. So we are starting to see more reef sharks in the area, all different species. So I had John Dodd from Atlantic Shark Institute approach me, and he was like, hey, I'm hearing about this seal population on Block Island. What's going on with it? And so he was like, do you think the seal population is going to get big enough where sharks are going to want to start going to the north side of Block Island? Because he tags them. He's like, right now they're not. The sharks, he said, were going from New York. They're bypassing the south side of Block Island. They're going straight to Cape Cod because that's where their buffet is. And these are the larger sharks that are going to Cape Cod. Here, you know, we have this growing seal population, but there were just so many questions he kept asking. I'm like, that's a great question, but I don't know. So we were like, let's collaborate. So it took us a couple of years, but we got this project together where now we're also putting acoustic tags on seals. So that's what John tags his sharks with, acoustic tags. Before we were tagging our seals with satellite tags, which is great. We're getting that real-time data. But the tag lasts 3 months. We've never seen if our seals actually come back to this area, if they stay here all year long, what's happening. So there's also this theory that maybe the population on Cape Cod is getting to their maximum size, and now they don't have the food resources to sustain that population. So seals are redistributing to this area. So it's all a balance. But satellite acoustic tags, when you put them on a shark, you put it under the skin. And so there's lots of protections around marine mammals where you can't do that. You can't administer or apply acoustic tags the same way you do with sharks. So we had to get creative and come up with a way to put these acoustic tags on a cattle tag, which is what we're already putting on seals. And so we've used this epoxy resin and then also a wire, and one of our partners at Atlantic Marine Conservation Society drilled holes in this tag and was able to affix it to it. And so we got approval through a permit, or he did, in order to apply acoustic tags now to seals. So this is kind of a really cool project because it's not really being done. And so we're now able to compare our data with these acoustic tags with the data that John has with sharks, with the data that Rhode Island DEM has with fish in different species. And we're able to see how all these different species are interacting and how environmental changes might be also playing a role into it. Acoustic tags, you'll notice the price of the tag is a lot cheaper as well, which is very helpful. The only downfall to the acoustic tags is that we can't just get that real-time data. We have to basically pull receivers up that are placed in the water on a seasonal basis. We pull them up 2 or 3 times a year. Atlantic Shark Institute has receivers. Rhode Island DEM has receivers. I got to go out and see how the process works and help a couple of months ago in winter. But it's an exhausting, long process. And then once you get the receiver, you have to download all the data from it, which takes a lot of time to sort that. And so basically, if an animal is within 600 yards of a receiver, it will pick up that ping. And then that gets downloaded into a big database with all different researchers. Anyone who has a receiver can download that data into the database, and then your animal is going to have that unique number. Other researchers won't know what species it is, but they'll know if your animal was picked up on their receiver in Canada or wherever it is. So we're able to see where these animals are going. So this is kind of a look at our rehab animals from 2024 from some of that sat tag data. So you'll see every color is a different animal. So your question about do you have to release them where they were found? I mean, here we are. You'll see these animals went up through the Gulf of St. Lawrence. They were up by Greenland within 3 weeks. So they travel very far distances in very short periods of time. But it's definitely very interesting. We're definitely seeing that trend where they like to head up north, especially this time of year. And these are harp seals, so some of these are gray seals in this area, but also a lot of harp seals. Another interesting thing, if you guys notice, a lot of animals love to go straight to the canyon area right over here, that shelf. There's got to be some really great fish for them over there, but so it's really interesting to see. I mean, these animals were all released at different times of year, but they all kind of beelined it for this animal here, or this animal, that area right there. So this is this year's animals. So a little bit different. These are seals that were released at different times. Again, we have one seal. She's still pinging. She loves the Long Island area, but she hasn't left this area. She has a spinal deformity. She's able to swim fine, but she looks like a little meatball. She is like a shrunken, tiny little meatball seal. She's like a third of the size she probably should be. She's adorable. But so I'm kind of happy that she's in this area. I'm like, okay, she's safe over here because I get a little worried about them over here. But it's interesting. See, all these seals spent many, many weeks in this area here. I joke that I should have a side job of where I give fishermen the inside scoop on where the seals are. There's got to be a lot of good fish in this area as well. So it's interesting to see where they go. And then these are all seals that went through rehab. Then we had a day on Block Island where we tagged seals, part of another project that a research facility, Atlantic Marine Conservation Society on Long Island is doing. We went to Block Island, we just tagged seals that were on the beach sitting there, and we released them right after we tagged them. So they did not come into rehab, but we want to see if there's any changes, if rehab's impacting their movements. Again, you kind of see this area. They love to go, right by the Nantucket area. They were all about 40 miles east of Nantucket at the same time, which was really kind of cool. So they're obviously following some prey. And these animals are all still pinging except for this one in purple right here, which was hanging around Monomoy. So I was like, I don't know what happened with this one. We'll see. Hopefully he's still doing okay. And then climate change is also directly impacting harp seals. So we see Arctic species of seals in our area. We've talked about the gray seals. We've talked about harbor seals, which are common animals. Harp seals will come into this area between January and April or May. They're an Arctic species. They live on ice packs. And when they come to our area now, before the 90s, we actually never had our harp seals in the area. They was considered an out-of-habitat species. Now we're starting to see them. You would think maybe Arctic species, they would go more to colder areas. They come here in the winter months though, but they're used to living on these ice packs. And so they're gonna follow food. But when they come here, we don't have snow and ice packs, and they need to eat snow and ice for extra hydration because of how cold it is in the Arctic, how dry the air is. Normally seals get all of their hydration from the fish that they eat. So these guys need extra hydration. So they're used to eating the substrate they're on. We don't have ice packs here, so it's not snowing with climate change nearly as much as it used to. And so now we're having these guys on the beach, and when they get stressed, so when people approach them, we often see them start to eat the substrate they're on, which instead of being the snow and ice is rocks, it's sand. And so these animals come in, a lot of times we have to do radiographs to look at what's in their stomach. Before I go to the next slide, just to point out, cool species, their coat pattern is very spotted when they're young. And they're this beautiful harp when they're older. And they move very differently from our gray seals and our harbor seals. You'll see they kind of use their claws and they grip the substrate they're on because they're having to grip these ice packs and stuff in the Arctic. And so when we see them on the beach, they do move differently. But this is just an inside shot at what we see when they come in a lot of times. So this is actually a hooded seal, which is another Arctic species, but we see the same thing with harp seals. This is when it first came in, so completely impacted. Luckily, this seal had a lot of smaller rocks in its stomach. This animal stranded in Providence in February and decided to haul out next to a beer garden. And so we put our signs up. We had people out there until sunset, and the sun set. And then a lot of people from the beer garden after hours decided to come over and unfortunately disrupt the seal. She started eating with the rocks, but she was released. This is after a couple weeks in our care. We were able to get a lot of those out, and then eventually she passed almost all of them. If an animal has bigger rocks in their stomach, we have to do surgery though. And they often feel very full, but they obviously aren't eating regularly, so they come in with big glucose issues. They're very dehydrated. So it's directly impacting them and their health. So this species has a rough go. We also talked about cold stun sea turtles. So most of the sea turtles that we see stranding due to cold stunning, I mean, think about, we used to have this gradual kind of change to the colder seasons. Now we're seeing more abrupt changes. And so it goes from, good old New England too. You can have a beautiful day and then all of a sudden it's absolutely freezing. But winter seems to kind of hit out of nowhere now. And a lot of sea turtles will come into this Cape Cod Bay area to eat. And thinking about a sea turtle, they have this really innate sense where they need to go south when the cold hits. Well, these sea turtles are stuck here. They try to go south. They can't go south, so they have to try to navigate north to go all the way around to get south. A lot of times it takes them longer to navigate out of this area. And so by the time they do start to navigate, it's freezing, and they strand all along this side here on these big beaches. So Cape Cod has a lot of programs where people go out proactively to monitor for turtles. We have a hypothesis, which I'm very curious to see, but think about the coastline of Cape Cod, these massive beaches. Now look at this area. We tag sea turtles, they come into Long Island Sound. We have tons of sea turtles that actually go all the way to this area here and spend a lot of time down here. How does the shoreline differ in Long Island area and Connecticut shoreline versus you think about Cape Cod? Main difference. We have a lot more houses, a lot more residential properties. It's a rocky coastline, a lot of marshes, hard to access areas. So sea turtles come in here. What we're trying and hoping to establish is more of a monitoring program to look for these animals because we think a lot of sea turtles strand in our area. We just don't get calls about them or don't get to them in time. So that's one thing with this group even here. In the winter months, if people are able to, if you're out here in the winter, kind of walk the beaches at the high tide line to look for sea turtles, that's one thing we're really hoping to kind of get a more formalized program for Connecticut shoreline to try to see if we're missing a lot of these animals. So that's the main thing. So overall, just to kind of sum everything back up, just the importance of having our rescue and response program and collecting all this data and how it's directly connected to the environmental changes we're seeing and the different types of strandings and trends that are changing over the years and the overall connection to our human health and all the importance. So hope you guys enjoyed. And this was, I did watch I was part of, listened to a great webinar a couple weeks ago, and people always ask, what they can do to help. And, it's a lot of these inconveniences. I've told people, you gotta take that extra couple minutes to go put water in a reusable container or use reusable bags, stuff like that. We have to change these things, use less plastic in our lives. But this girl, Callie Violenturf, she is a leatherback sea turtle researcher. She's awesome. But she said this the other day in this webinar. I was like, yes, that's so true. But if we're not inconveniencing ourselves in our daily lives, we're really not doing enough for conservation. And we have to make these changes. And it takes that individual change and that individual effort. And that collaboratively really is where we're going to see that difference made. So just wanted to end on that note, and thank you guys so much for having me.